Well, welcome to our stream. It is great to have you with us. I've got a very exciting guest for us to talk with today. I don't know if you've ever read the book Operation Exodus, about 120 people who gathered in Jerusalem to pray in the middle of the First Gulf War. They set up the Ebenezer Emergency Aid Fund, and they started to repatriate Jewish people back into Israel. It is a book full of prophecy, God moving, answers to prayer. Well, our guest today was at that prayer meeting, and he now works for the Ebenezer Operation Exodus. His name is Johannes Barthel. I wanted to get him on because not only is he the regional coordinator for Ebenezer for the former Soviet Union, Europe and Israel. I met him in 2019 in Israel, and wherever I went, he just had a great reputation. People in the Jewish agency, just around the place, wherever we seemed to go, everyone seemed to love him. So here is Johannes Barthel. Welcome, Johannes.
Well, Chris, it's great to be with you today. I was really longing to come to UK since a long time, and at least we see us in this way.
Yeah, we had to cancel, didn't we? You were supposed to be coming over in March 2020, and we had to unfortunately cancel due to this current pandemic and what's going on. So, Johannes, tell us a little bit about yourself, about you and your journey, how you came to work for Ebenezer.
Yeah, actually, it was in the 90s when in autumn, more or less, I just finished my study and I had my personal quiet time. When I felt from the Lord, he's telling me, go to Israel. And then I found a handwritten paper in my letterbox a day or 2 days later saying prayer meeting in Jerusalem. I have heard somewhere else from this prayer meeting, but it was like a real confirmation. So I applied for it, of course, long before internet and emails. And I booked my flight, actually flying via London to Jerusalem. And at this night, the Gulf War started. So it was one of the last flights where people were coming into Israel and way back.
Wow. And so that's how it all started. And how have what's your journey been since then? Because, you now work for Ebenezer, but I know you were a pastor as well. Tell us a bit about your journey.
Well, actually, it was very exciting when we prayed there during this week, and God really spoke very clear, help my people to come home, and we started to collect money and everything. So when I came back, I was like an elder in a church in this time, and we started to support the first flights and collecting money for the ships some months later. So I was always in a way involved of getting the information out, but I was not actively involved. I mean, we sent some volunteers to Ukraine and things like this, but it was not before in 2004 when I went with my family to Spain, we as missionaries, and we started to pastor a church there, and I was asked to be the national coordinator of Ebenezer in Spain, which gave me a little bit more insight, and I gave a little bit more seminars about Israel, and I was more involved with what is going on international. And then,
Yeah, so now many of us, we're Christians in churches. We may think there's something special about Israel, but we're not quite sure. I mean, Jesus came, didn't he? Didn't he fulfill the covenant? What does Ebenezer do? And why should Jewish people be going back to Israel?
Well, you're complete right. That was my idea of being a Christian for years. I knew there is a state of Israel, but I did not at all connect it with the promises of what we call Old Testament until I realized, which is something so simple, God did not change, like between Old and New Testament. He's still the same God. And then reading anew all the promises, I found out that, look, there are so many scriptures not fulfilled yet. So if which is specific for Israel, I mean, you cannot apply to the church like who would be the 12 tribes and who would be what land should we, I mean, Jesus never promised us to have a land, to possess and everything. So taking these scriptures which are not fulfilled, which is still a lot, and then living in the time today where you see a literal fulfillment, that excites me. And I think in depth, it has to do, what picture do we have from God? Can we really trust him? I mean, does God finish the work he starts? So if he would not finish with Israel what he started, how can I know I will be in heaven? I mean, it could be a promise where God suddenly decides, no, I don't think so. I will do something else, but God's word is yes and amen. So looking what is happening with Israel, it really strengthens my whole trust relationship with God.
I mean, that's one of the things which I had to come to terms with. As you know, I went to Israel. You were there. You were my guide going around Israel, and I didn't realize there were so many scriptures which hadn't been fulfilled yet. I look at Isaiah and I look at it and I go, well, that's all happened. And now we're looking about how it affects the church, not realizing what is happening. And I know you talk about Aliyah. Did I get it right? Aliyah?
Yeah.
About, the return of Jewish people to the homeland. What really impacted me was when I'm looking at these scriptures, and I know people say, well, you read the scripture and you're there in the promised land and you can, Israel, and you're seeing it. But for me, it was how literally and how Isaiah really relates to Jewish people now. I'm not talking necessarily messianic Jewish people who believe in Jesus, but even people who are of the Jewish faith and believe in their Bible, and they're looking at scriptures like Isaiah and making it happen. So what is the process of Jewish people coming and making Aliyah? How does Ebenezer help do that?
Well, actually, it's not, you would say everybody comes under the same concept, because it's so different. I mean, the more than 180,000 Olim, which are the ones who make Aliyah, we help. I think each one has a different story. So for some, it just needs someone to encourage him, to tell him, look, it is possible. And what we can help you is maybe help you with paperwork or help you to come to the airport or just encourage you. So in each country we are operating, it is very different. And I would say it's not we who really brings them home. It's God bringing them home. And God just allows us in a part of this journey to help with and to be at the side and to stand with the Olim.
So is there any, I know you could probably go on for ages and these stories are very long, but is there any one or two stories that you could bring out of people making that journey and you seeing God at work within that journey?
Yeah, I mean, just this morning, which was very interesting, when I woke up, I got an email from Jerusalem with a little video clip of a young couple from Uzbekistan. We helped. And because of the COVID problems at the moment, there are no regular flights and the wife is pregnant. So it looked like there's no way for them to come. And we started last year a special fund for people who really are in a special need to come to Israel and need special help. So with this money, we helped them to get a plane to Frankfurt. And on this plane from Frankfurt, they could fly to Israel, which would not be possible if we would not have paid for this. And now they sent me a video thanking for what is going on, because they were really desperate, especially with the pregnancies. They want to have the baby in Israel. So little stories like this, are what is happening.
That's awesome. And in terms of, I remember you taking me to, I think it was the Jewish Agency. Did I get it right? That was about the first morning we were there, where the British have got some history which maybe should best be forgotten for us. Repented of. What really struck me was it wasn't that just you guys were doing it as part of Ebenezer, but you were connected in to, I'm not sure if you call them authorities or leaders within Israel. And not only were you connected in, the respect they had for you and the regard they had for you, I was really impressed at. What is the relationship with you and authorities within Israel?
I think that's a thing 30 years ago we would have only dreamed of. I mean, it was especially for me as a German, I would never think the Jewish people, even from the state of Israel, would ask us to help them, because I'm convinced they could do it without us, if I'm honest. Or, I mean, even God wouldn't need us. But it's like, I mean, God gives us a chance, you know. We cannot always look back what we made wrong as Christians, but almost like he said, look, now you can do something good. And that excites me so much. And like some years ago, as the leader of the Jewish agency, he asked me in his office, and he said, look, we want to have a joint place where we sit together in Berlin, in Germany, helping Olim to come to Israel. And that's amazing. That's worldwide. I think the first place where we sit, Christians and Jewish people, working together to bless the Jewish people, not only in Germany, but from all over Europe now. They come to this place and prepare themselves on their way to Israel. So how it happened, I think, because of God's grace, but also our attitude must always be right. You know, I've heard so many Christians like saying to the Jewish people, oh, they are unbelievers. I mean, I met so many Jewish people. They have more faith than we. I mean, going in a country, in a tiny country with so much challenges and problems, and giving up very often a life where they could have a better life, we would say, in natural terms, and settling there and starting with a new language. It is because they have faith in the promises of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, which is also our God, of course.
And that was one of the things that's really struck me. I mean, we're in this agency talking to people who are, you know, repatriating people to Israel, and yet the woman we were talking to, I don't think she believed in Jesus. You could tell me if I'm wrong, but she had a deep faith within the Jewish scriptures. She had a deep faith, and so many people around had a deep faith. They might not know Jesus, but they had a deep faith in what God has said. And as you were saying, seeing some of these towns, behind barbed wire and whatever else in occupied territories, or I'm not quite sure what we're supposed to call them.
Well, we don't call them occupied territories. It's Israel, actually. We call it Judea and Samaria. So nowhere
people understand what we mean if I say that. They'll understand what I'm talking about. And yet they've given up. You say some of these have given up, you know, wealthy places to go and live in danger, go and live in poverty, because they're reading scripture and following it and putting their lives, their families on the line to follow the same God that we worship. They just haven't got the revelation of Jesus yet.
Yeah, I think, you know, that is something which should not separate us, because it is even written in so many scriptures that the nations, and I think that the believers in the nations, you know, believe in the promises, they will help the Jews coming back, you know, and then it says that the Messiah will come. And I mean, we agree with, like, even a lot of rabbis in Israel that we disagree maybe at the moment who is the Messiah. So we believe he comes a second time. They believe he comes the first time. And very often they would say to us, but we all want him to come. And once he's there, we will see who was right, you know. And I think that's it, you know. I mean, the Christian church has done so many wrong with Israel. It doesn't mean we have to deny our faith, but it's really, we have to fulfill what God has called us specifically from the Bible to help them to come back. And then the Bible says, once they're in the land, God will give them a new heart and a new spirit. It never says you give them a new heart or a new spirit. It says very clear, you help them to come back, and I will do the other work, you know. So I personally think it doesn't help a lot if I try to convince someone about my belief who the Messiah is, but I can share something of the love of God has given us, you know, and then it's God who will do the work whenever and however. It's his job, you know.
Well, one of the things I don't know how much we can talk about this, but one of the bits, favorite part of the tour that you took me on, we went up into the Judean hills. to that farm and house of prayer on the Judea hills. Now, from what I remember, I mean, it was like, don't worry, you're perfectly safe here. And the guy's wearing a handgun, openly carrying a handgun. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not, I mean, I know he's originally from the States, but I'm not used to walking around my property with a handgun on me, just in case of what could happen. But if I correct me if I'm wrong, but he is Jewish. He believes in Jehovah. He doesn't believe in Jesus, as far as I can understand. And yet you and him had a great relationship, and it just struck me so much. I mean, he was talking about how he's going around this place that he's building, and how he's building on prophetic words from God. He's walking around and listening to God. I was absolutely blown away by this guy's faith, and the fact that we were actually able to pray with him in the house of prayer that he's house of prayer he's building. Yeah. Tell us a bit about his journey, if you can. What can you tell us about what's going on there?
Well, again, that's a very good example, I think, of where God just shows us where do we have a common foundation, and that's the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And even if we see Jesus difference in them and say, no, we see it different, we should start where we agree on, pray together on the promises which are enough, and all expect very soon the Messiah to come. That's I think at the moment our calling, what we have.
Yeah, and I mean it shook my faith a bit, because I read Isaiah, I use Isaiah in prayer meetings, I preach from Isaiah and other scriptures, and yet his understanding of Isaiah was so real, so tangible. He's saying, look, that prophecy there, that's where it's being fulfilled, right there. And it kind of like made me think, wow, his depth of faith is quite a bit securer than mine. I mean, I have to be a bit honest. It's kind of like put me in a bit of a, what do I believe? My faith seems to be so low compared to what he's doing. But what really caught my ear was, he said, and this was just before, I think it was either in the prayer place of prayer he's building or not. He said, "My God has revealed to him that he is the God of all nations, that he's the God for everyone, and that everyone should be coming and worshiping Jehovah." So, how can we support the work of Aliyah? How can we as Christians get involved with what's going on and in the stories of what's happening?
I think how God has led us the last 30 years, that we have never left the foundation of being a prayer ministry. So we still see prayer and intercession as a good foundation, which we have built a network of intercessors who knows the scriptures, who praise the scriptures. And this we still see not as a religious thing. We still see that is our powerhouse of our ministry. So I would firstly encourage everybody to start to pray, to know the scriptures, take them literally where it says Israel, take them for Israel. And then, of course, out of the prayer, very often God speaks to us. For example, to go to certain nations, to start a work in certain nations. And so we developed a network almost worldwide where we can help Jewish people, practical help, like in their move. Even it may start in cleaning their house or packing their container or bringing them to the airport, depending on which country. And of course, it also is a huge financial challenge. I mean, if we think about the teams we still have in the former Soviet Union, in many countries, and we run minibuses and we help people getting passports, birth certificates. So it's still a huge financial challenge, or sometimes even maybe chartering again flights for a group or a larger group of people who have to leave countries. So in all these aspects, you can help. Plus, you can help in your nation, maybe, in getting the message out to the church, to other believers,
Well, one thing which, I mean, you said, how can we help? A lot of people say prayer just as a precursor to, and give us your money. it's kind of like, I'll send you a prayer letter, and in it is a request for money. But from you guys, I don't get that whatsoever, because you really value prayer. What I noticed when I went into the office in Jerusalem was how much you guys pray, how much you believe. You've got people there from different denominations, different countries, all gathering, and they believe in prayer. And they've all seemed to have amazing stories how God has led them to places. And it really blesses me and really, I love what you guys are doing, because the first thing you guys go to is, we need to pray. We need to pray. And it's not just lip service, it is, we need to pray. And I believe at this time, the power of prayer is something which God is awakening everywhere. So how has the pandemic affected what you guys are doing?
Well, it has affected a lot our teams, especially on the ground, which are operational, because suddenly we found out there were no flights or less flights available, or suddenly flights on short note. So we had to be much more flexible. And sometimes there were, like in Ukraine, for example, there were 3 airports where Olim could leave, and now it's only from Kiev. And sometimes they get a notice 2 or 3 days in advance. Oh, there are 20 people 500 kilometers away. So you have to organize small minibuses. You have to bring them to the airport, maybe organize hotels, or others already left their jobs and their houses, their apartments, and suddenly they arrive at the airport and find out there's no flight. So I told our teams we leave no one back at the airport, and we could help many of them very spontaneous with whatever was needed,
So in terms of your history, Ebenezer's history, Operation Exodus, it was around boats, was it? We all knew about the boats which went around, but you're saying here now it's more about flights, because the boats don't exist anymore, do they? How is it mainly through flights then that people get in?
Yeah, actually, when we had the boats, the first, I think, 13 years until 2004, they brought about 40,000 plus Olim to Israel. But we brought over 120,000 with flights, So anyway, the flights now, it's cheaper, it's faster, but there may come a time again where we need boats for whatever reason. So now it's very different. Normally the Jewish agency pays for the flights, but in some cases also we pay for the flights. It would go too deep. Why? Or people need flights or trains just to see, for example, the consul who checks their papers, and things like this. That is something where Ebenezer gives a lot of help.
And tell us about the work you're doing in Haifa with the house and things around that. What's going on there?
That's something very new. When Ebenezer started, there was no sense at all to do work in Israel. And then we have seen, it would be good to have someone in Israel the Olim can contact. And we had a very small office, which has grown a lot, the office in Jerusalem. But some years ago, not too long, we felt we should have a place where Olim can have a first place once they arrive. Because you have to understand, they need to give a physical address where they will live to get their plane ticket, to get the allowance to come into the land. And we got a lot of calls where people ask us, I don't have relatives, I don't have a place, so can you not offer us something? And so now God has given us in summer 2019 this house in Haifa where we can host around 20, maybe 25 Olim, depending on the family configuration. And since then, until February this year, we already had 1,985 overnights in this house for Olim in Haifa, which is a real a good testimony, even in Haifa. And now, since a couple of months, we have also an apartment it doesn't belong to us, but someone gives it to us, which we also can use, like only 10 minutes away from the Haifa house. So, and we are praying for more places like this where Olim can come and have a first place. Average time they stay in the Haifa house is like 31 days. and then they find their own place. Yeah.
So you're doing that. You've got your house in Haifa, which you're doing and helping all the process going through. You've got leaders and regional people all around the world working in this, haven't you? What are people like doing in the UK or in Europe to help with what's going on?
Of course, we try always in every country to see what's the need of the Olim, of the ones who want to go to Israel. Of course, it's very different if you think in a Central Asian country where for someone to get a birth certificate costs more than a month's salary, he needs more help like this. Here in UK or Germany and France, for example, we offer things like airport transfer. Or sometimes it's just encouragement or helping organizing an Aliyah fair, so whatever is needed. Of course, in Germany, through having now the Israel Program Center, today with the Jewish Agency, it's different because there are a lot of programs which just gives the word out to the Jewish community. Look, here are people who speak about Israel, who tell you what it means to be a Jew and things like this. So in every country, it's different.
Yeah. Now, I met you when I went to Israel. That was December 2019. The last time I went anywhere on an aeroplane was to Israel in 2019. I thought I was fed up with aeroplanes, and now I'm actually looking forward to getting back on one again. Now, when you do tours of call it the Holy Land, tours of the Holy Land, yours aren't the same, are they? I mean, what if someone came on a tour with you? With Ebenezer, what kind of things do you show them? What's the point of it? What do you get out of it?
I think because there are so many tours, and when we started with the tours, I was thinking, why don't we just tell people go to whatever tour organizer? I mean, our focus is, or at least a big part, is to meet real people who made Aliyah. I had people on tours who said, I've been 10 times in Israel, but I never met a Jew. I mean, maybe as a tour guide, but then they don't speak about Jews. They go, Jesus was here and there, which is great, but I mean, they don't see anything of the real life. So we try, depending on the tour, to meet some, like, when do we have the chance to meet someone who came from Ethiopia or from India, who was out of Israel, his family, since 2,700 years, if you think about the tribe of Manasseh. And then you hear their testimony, how they prayed over the thousands of years, every year, next year in Jerusalem, and now they see it fulfilled. I mean, to hear this and to see these people, that is so exciting. And I think that is what a lot of tours would not do. And even going into Samaria, going into Judean hills, or at the Gaza Strip, praying at the Gaza Strip, so that are not places which are like very touristic places, let me put it like this.
Yeah, I mean, so that was, me coming on the tour was a bit like that. I was there as a, church leader, knowing that Israel was important, but not quite sure why. I'd listen to teaching, from people, from Ebenezer even, and I'm still going, yeah, I don't get it. I know there's something special about Israel, but it hasn't quite landed me. And it took me about a week for it to land with me when I was with you guys. But I think I now get it. That's quite a dangerous thing to say, isn't it? When you think you kind of got something, maybe you missed it. But it really helped me understand why it is important that Israel exists. Why is it important that people are coming back to Israel and just to experience? I mean, for me, it was more experiencing what God is doing in the land, for you to go, that is God. That's what he's doing. I can't ignore this. That's kind of what I got out of going with you guys. So what haven't we covered? What other things are going on in the work of Ebenezer and what you are doing?
Well, I think what we are doing since last year, we started to have online prayer meetings from Monday to Friday with intercessors worldwide. And we had now over 250 prayer meetings. And that is something new where we felt the whole Ebenezer family is growing together, crying out to God. And what we see, there's a shift, which when we started was mainly the Russian-speaking Jews, and now focusing more on Europe and also America, which, we see Latin America, but US will be the major country where Jewish people will make Aliyah from, and somehow we have to prepare this, our hearts and our infrastructure and everything. So, and then of course, immigration into Israel, so planting them into the land. Like, I give you an example. We have never given out as many food parcels and food vouchers in Israel as since last year when the pandemic started. Numbers have doubled, plus we have visited absorption centers and Olim who were in quarantine calling us, I need something to eat. I can't go out to buy food. I don't have relatives or anybody helping me. Can you bring us food? And that was such a testimony and such an opportunity for our Israel team to help them. So that is, some things which developed even during the last year.
Brilliant. So what should we be in our churches in the West? Try to speak. Europe is a big place, but and then the US is a big place. What is it, in your opinion, that we should be praying into, or talking about, or preaching about, or learning about, which we're not doing a great job at the moment?
I think a big challenge, and not only in the UK, it's all over Europe and many other parts of the world, is still this so-called replacement theology. That the church has replaced Israel. Like if what I said at the beginning, that if God changed somehow between the Old and New Testament. Even naming it Old and New Testament. It's one book. You cannot separate it. And just taking what is for Israel, take for Israel. And what is for the church, take for the church, not to take away from Israel all the blessings, which this teaching says, all the blessings are for us. We like to read the Psalms of blessing, but we never take the cursings. We say all the curses are for the Jews. And I think we have to get rid of it, because the church and the people in the church will never get to a real understanding who God is and about his character if we do not see the Bible as one book, which is not a contradiction. And we are, I grew up the first maybe 4 or 5 years of being a Christian. I always thought we are the spiritual Israel. I thought even it's in the Bible, until one day I found out it's not. That's a term which is an invention. There's nothing like a spiritual Israel. There's a Israel and there's a church. And for God, it's no problem to handle both. I think he's big enough, So that's if we start with this, that's already a big gain. Because what we see from history, in Germany, most people who were Nazis would have called themselves Christians. Over 80% of pastors in the Lutheran Church voted for Hitler and supported Hitler. And that were the people who killed 6 million Jews and who started World War II and all these horrible things, So we have to understand it. If we take Israel and the promises out of the Bible, where we can end up. It's only 2-3 generations from where we are now, where these things happened. And people having the Bible, you could read it, but they didn't, because they were so full with this replacement theology.
Yeah, and you mentioned Germany, and the United Kingdom hasn't had the best record either, and even closer times in terms of how Israel has been treated. So how can people, if they want to know more, how can they contact you? How they can get a hold of Ebenezer? How can they connect? What's the best way to do it, or hear more from what's going on?
I think in the UK it's very easy, because we have the office in Bournemouth and we have great leadership in the UK, a great board. We have many local prayer groups. And since not too long, we have more and more videos on our YouTube channel, where we have up-to-date small video clips from our work in the different parts of the world. So it's where you can get information. I think we do 4 times a year, like we call it bulletin or something. It's just like a little bit teaching, but mainly testimonies. That's okay. That's now the German version, but of course we have the UK version, and you can download it or it can be sent physically. So like many churches, they get so many copies and then they can give it out, So just get connected and ask the Lord. I mean, you said with the donations, we felt it's not right to go aggressive on donations, but it's right to teach the word, tell people what is going on. And, it is something the Holy Spirit has to move people with everything, be it prayer, be it helping practically or donating. It must be something born out of the Spirit and not because you see some pictures of poor children or needy people. That is a wrong motivation, I think. Yeah.
And is there a website we can go to?
Yeah, it's. I think it's operation-exodus.org. We are just.
We'll get up on the screen, so it'll be fine.
Actually, we're doing a new website which should be online in maybe even this month. We hope so. We work on it since last year, but because it's so international ministry, it will be multi-language, so that it takes a longer time. But I think you will be redirected. So at the moment, it's operation-exodus.org, and you find basic information. Yeah.
Brilliant. And if people want to hear you teach and preach, is there any way we can do that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm very happy like we do today. I normally, of course, now it's a lot on Zoom. I hope to come to UK soon because my daughter lives there and my baby grandchild, which is now since yesterday 7 months. And we only saw her in August when she was very little. So there are always possibilities to invite me or other people from our team. Of course, in the UK, as I said, there's a great team and also of people who preach about it, who share testimonies, which you can invite to your church, and we're happy to come and give out information.
That's good. And I was thinking more of so we can learn about Ebenezer as well, but it's more like the theology, the doctrine, what you were talking about. Do you have a YouTube channel or anything like that? Or is it all in German? In which case, it's no good to me.
No. It's a UK YouTube channel, really. So it's where we also have teaching videos, like from Tom Brooker has a very good series there. So we give. I have. Each one who hears it, we have a booklet which is free. I wrote a little booklet which is just called Aliyah, the Miracle of the Return. It's a German version, but it's available in English, and you can have it for free. And I've written it, so it's also for men. I mean, I know some men read a lot, but most men do not like to read, so it's not so many pages, but it gives a basic insight of, a little bit what is our theology behind it and the examples from the Bible, why to help Jewish people to return and how we can do it. So everybody who sees it can order this book for free in our Bournemouth office. Well,
thank you, Johannes, for being with us and being with you in Israel just over a year ago, wasn't it? 2019. Is that just over a year ago.
It was my last trip to Israel. Yeah, it was. I mean, I cannot believe that I haven't been now so long. Yeah.
But it was a real life-changing event for me, real life-changing week. Wow. Having my thinking challenged, my doctrine challenged, my beliefs challenged, everything challenged, and I came out a lot stronger, fortunately, because you could have left me broken, but fortunately I came out stronger. So thank you for that. It was great, and it's been great having you on. Right, well, we're going to call it end there. Thank you very much for being with us, and thank you very much for listening. Have a great rest of your evening or whatever it is you do. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Chris. God bless. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Bye.
Bye.